Okay, good morning all, and welcome to the Management and Development Committee. Welcome to those who have come to participate in today's discussions. Before we start, we'll just go around the committee and let everyone introduce themselves, starting with Councillor Jury.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Neil Jory, and I'm the member for Milton Ford Ward.
My name is Jeff Moody, Councillor Jeff Moody, Tavistock North Ward.
I'm Councillor Tony Leach, Oakhampton North.
Councillor Alistair Cunningham, Buckland Monacorum Ward.
Caroline Mott, Bridgestow Ward.
Terry Shafcott, Bridgestow Ward.
Sam Wakeham, Councillor for Hatherley Ward.
Peter Whitehead, Principal Planner.
Pat Weimer, Head of Development Management.
Rich Edel, Chair of the Committee and Ward Member for Buckland Monacorum.
Steve Guthrie, Ward Member for Drew Stainton.
Good morning, David Fairbairn, Head of Legal Services and the Council's Monitoring Officer.
Catherine Hall, Democratic Services Officer for West Devon and Clerk to this committee.
Thank you very much. Item 2 on the agenda, apologies for absence.
We have no apologies, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. In accordance with the Code of Conduct, members are invited to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in items to be considered at this meeting. Are there any declarations? Councillor Leach.
Yes, page 7, application 315/24 OPA. I'm on Oakhampton Town's Planning Committee, where this has already come, well, previous ones have come forward, and I've declared an interest, not voted or debated.
Understood, but you will be speaking on behalf of the ward later on. Any other declarations? Okay, items requiring urgent attention, none have been brought to my notice. So we move on to item 5, which is the confirmation of the minutes for the 1st of July 2025. Can I take those as read? Thank you. We now have a short statement from our legal advisor.
Note the short. Thank you, Chairman. The committee's starting point for determining planning applications, or the application this morning, is a statutory requirement to have regard to the policies of the development plan. In this case, the development plan is the joint local plan, and to any made neighbourhood plan, and also to have regard to any other material planning consideration. Material planning considerations are those matters that are concerned with the use and development of land in the public interest. Anything that does not serve that purpose is irrelevant, and the committee will not take it into account. The committee's decision will be made in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations suggest otherwise. So effectively, the committee is being asked to balance the policies of the local plan with material considerations and to reach a conclusion based on which it weighs more heavily. So effectively, in such cases, the committee will make a judgment, bearing in mind such factors as the relative importance of the relevant policies and the extent to which the development proposal complies with them or does not. So it's a question of balance. Thank you, Chairman.
Very much. So we now move on to the only planning application in front of us today, which is 381524 OPA, land adjacent to Baldwin Drive, Radford Way, Oakhampton. And we have 4 registered speakers, but before that we have the officer's report. So over to Mr. Whitehead.
Thank you, Chairman. This application seeks outline permission for a mix of residential housing and associated infrastructure to include affordable housing. Access is the only matter of detail tabled for consideration. The layout, scale, appearance and landscaping of the development being reserved at this outline stage. The number of units is not stated either, and this will be confirmed at reserved matter stage. An illustrative layout showing 60 units has been provided, and I'll refer to this later, how this is purely illustrative and only shows one way in which the site could be developed. Trusting the application is approved as recommended, it will not be amongst the approved plans listed on the decision notice. This is the site. Members will see it in the centre of, or towards the centre of Oakhampton, surrounded by existing development. Measures about 1.7 hectares. It also shows the site. Again, surrounded by housing, you'll see Stirling's Way to the north, Stocks Park to the east, Baldwin Drive and Radford Way to the south, and Howard Close to the west. This is the actual red-lined application site. As I say, the only matter of detail proposed at this stage is the means of access. This is the plan submitted in that regard, which shows the intention that the main estate road effectively be a continuation of Radford Way. And this is a photograph of Radford Way. Members can picture then that the estate road will effectively continue on from the spur at the head of Radford Way as it exists. 5.5 metre wide carriageway, 2 metre wide footways either side. Some other photographs then. So the north end of the site, as members will recognise, includes part of Kellens Lane. This is the part of Kellens Lane that is currently not open to vehicular traffic or pedestrians. It's private land owned by the applicants. There is currently a barrier across it. This picture was taken about a year ago, showing some gabion baskets across the sort of junction of the applicant's ownership with the sort of persimmon land to the north. More recently, this land has been enclosed with Heras fencing and concrete blocks, as we can see here. But part and parcel of the application, as I'll describe in more detail later, is the opening up, or works to allow the opening up of Kellens Lane to pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic, with essentially footways both to the north side of Kellens Lane, as I'm trying to indicate there with the mouse, and to the south side. So picking up the existing footways and completing them as far as the applicant's ownership, which is roughly here, and also completing the carriageway. So as I say, it's an outline application. It's been submitted with what are called parameter plans, which show some indicative details as to how the development could be carried out. As you'll note, this shows the vehicular access off Radford Way to the south, an estate road through the site, and also indicates the provision of a cycleway or footway through the site from north to south, linking Kellens Lane and Radford Way. We also have a landscape parameter plan which shows the retention of existing hedges and trees to the north and west boundaries, an area of open space and an attenuation basin to the top corner by Kellens Lane. A land use parameter plan which broadly shows residential development wrapping around the site in a sort of brown colour, and again the Suds Basin top corner. And a building heights parameter plan which indicates the preference for two-storey development across the site. This is the indicative layout. As I say, this is not for detailed consideration at this stage. It shows 60 units, but as I say, the description of development does not now refer to the number of units, and that number would be agreed at reserve matter stage. So this is purely illustrative and shows just one way in which the site could be developed. But reading along with this plan, quite helpfully, there are some indicative sections which show the fall of the land from south to north. So the high point of the site is the boundary with Radford Way, and the site then progressively falls towards Kellens Lane and Stirling Way to the north. Some photographs now. This is the application site looking north towards Stirling's Way, Kellens Lane from Radford Way. Again, you can pick up the fall of the land gradually from the point I'm standing at down towards Kellens Lane and Stirling's Way to the north. This is from the same vantage point. The right-hand side shows bungalow in Radford Way, and then you can see the two-storey dwellings to the east of the site in Stocks Park. This is looking broadly from the same point, looking in a westerly direction towards Howard Close. And this is further towards the west side of the site, again looking at the two-storey development on Howard Close. Just turning the camera around a little bit, this is looking south now. You can see the dwellings in Howard Close to the right-hand side here, and the bungalows in Baldwin Drive to the left-hand side. And these are the boundary treatments along the boundary with Baldwin Drive. So, as I say, this is an outline application. All matters are reserved at this stage except access. In terms of principle then, so the key issue here is the principle of residential development on the site. Members will recognise that the JLP seeks to guide development according to the principles of sustainable development and in accordance with our settlement hierarchy. Worth noting that Oakhampton is one of the 6 main towns identified in the TTV area and therefore a location where we should be directing new housing. As noted in my presentation, the site is already surrounded by housing and it would be a logical site to therefore develop for such a purpose. There have been several applications for housing development on the site in the past. There is already a permission for 43 units and permission was sought and refused a couple of years ago, again for residential development. No objection was raised at that point to such a use. It's a highly sustainable location. The site is within walking distance of shops, the primary school, bus stops and employment opportunities. So taking all of these matters together, certainly in the view of officers, this is a highly sustainable location and an appropriate location for residential development. And we would therefore say that the principle of the development is an appropriate one. With regard to the means of access, as noted, this is the only matter of detail tabled currently. The intention then is that the main access will be a continuation of Radford Way. This is exactly the same arrangement as the last application, 444022 OPA. And Highways did not object to the proposal then, and no objection is raised by Highways now. Highways merely recommend conditions to secure details of the estate road layout and to secure a construction management plan. These conditions are included in the officer's recommendation. The application also, as I note, proposes the completion of the section of Kellens Lane within the applicant's ownership, including completion of footways to both sides and completion of the carriageway for vehicular traffic. It is also anticipated that a Section 38/278 agreement will be completed with County Council, allowing the road to be adopted by County Highways. As discussed at the site visit, there is a short section of Kellens Lane beyond this to the north, which is within the Persimmon Homes development that has not been finished off either. However, this is already covered by a Section 38 agreement with the County Council, and Highways are therefore confident that the completion of this section of road can also be secured. Thus, the works proposed in this application to be secured by Section 106 agreement should allow the completion and use of Kellens Lane as a through route for pedestrians and motor vehicles. Finally, it's appropriate to note that the application also seeks to secure a pedestrian route through the site, linking Radford Way and Kellens Lane. This should be step-free to ensure it is appropriate for all users. The details of this footway will be secured as part of the reserved matters layout. The heads of terms in the committee reports provide no trigger for the delivery of this through route, but after further discussion, it is recommended that the application for reserved matters which will include the necessary details of the footway, also provides details relating to the time of implementation and completion of this footway in relation to the occupation of the proposed dwellings. All other matters, as I say, are to be considered as part of the reserved matters application and or by condition. Members will note from the committee report that there are no objections to the development by technical consultees. We then come to infrastructure contributions and the matter of viability. As members will note, this application follows application 444-022 OPA, and likewise, that application was accompanied by a financial viability assessment indicating that the development could not support the usual package of infrastructure contributions. The applicant, in relation to the current application, as the application was originally submitted, the application offered 30% affordable housing, albeit intermediate housing only, but no financial contributions towards off-site OSSR or education. In relation to the application, therefore, the Council has instructed Vickery Holman to review the applicant's financial viability assessment and to advise us of its findings. As members will note from my report, Vickery Holman's conclusion was that the applicant's financial viability assessment significantly underestimated the build costs of the scheme, and that even allowing for some adjustment of build costs and sales values, it concluded that the development would only be marginally viable and that there would be no headroom to allow for infrastructure contributions. In the light of Vickery Holman's report, the applicant has now revised their affordable housing offer and now proposes 2 times 1-bed units to be secured by Section 106 agreement. Clearly, the policy expectation is that new development contributes to the provision of new or improved infrastructure that is commensurate with the impacts of the development. The contributions we have sought towards affordable housing, OSSR and education are considered reasonable and compliant with policy requirements and SIL tests, but importantly, would render the development unviable. Policy DEL 1 of the JLP sets out that in determining whether or not to grant planning permission, the LPAs will have regard to the overall economic, social and environmental benefits of the development, and whether, on balance, some relaxation of planning obligations is justified. And this, then, is the judgment we have carried out in the planning balance. Discussions have been undertaken with both OSSR and county education regarding the viability of the development and the lack of contributions offered in those regards. With regard to open space, it is notable that the earlier application, 444-022 OPA, made no allowance for off-site OSSR, and that the appeal inspector dealing with the appeal did not find this unacceptable, considering off-site open space contributions the least important behind affordable housing and education, and commenting about the site's proximity to existing open space. In relation to the current application, it is notable that the OSSR officer seeks a contribution, but fully acknowledges that this is subject to viability. With regard to education, whilst clear the requested contribution towards primary education infrastructure is SIL compliant, the County Council does not recommend the application be refused in the absence of such a contribution. Excuse me. Thus, whilst the absence of these contributions weighs against the proposal, it is difficult to conclude that the absence of these contributions weighs so heavily in the planning balance as to render the development unacceptable. More weight would reasonably be given, in my view, to the adverse impact of not securing policy-compliant affordable housing, given the acknowledged need. In terms of positive benefits then, we clearly have All right, I had some notes, apologies. I'll speak without them. So, in terms of positive benefits of the scheme, as is set out in the officer's report, we do not have a 5-year land supply. In fact, the shortfall in housing land is significant. We only have a 2.5-year land supply against the government's requirement for a 5-year land supply as set out in the revised NPPF. The application, whilst acknowledging does not provide policy-compliant affordable housing, nevertheless offers a limited contribution towards affordable housing, which will go a little way to meeting local housing needs. The site is also in a highly sustainable location. The development that's now proposed makes more efficient and effective use of land than the earlier permission, which was for 43 units. Our full expectation, certainly given the illustrative layout, is what will come forward at reserve matter stage is a scheme of more than 43 units. Also, significantly, the application proposes the connection of Kellens Lane, both for pedestrians and vehicular traffic, which in the view of officers amounts to a significant community benefit. And there are also economic benefits likely to accrue during the construction process in terms of employment of local staff and benefits to local businesses. Our overall conclusion then is that the relaxation of infrastructure requirements as indicated by DEL 1 does not render the development unacceptable, and that applying the tilted balance, as we must, given the absence of a 5-year land supply and the presumption in favour of sustainable development, the adverse impacts of the development do not outweigh the benefits identified. Therefore, the recommendation from myself as case officer is one of conditional approval subject to completion of a satisfactory legal agreement. In terms of heads of terms, slightly beefed up from those that are in the committee report, we are looking at the provision of 2 times 1-bed social rented flats, social rented units on the site. Details of footway and carriageway connections on Kellens Lane to be provided at reserve matter stage. We would expect a full detailed plan to accompany the layout of the estate as a whole. Submission of a Section 278, Section 38, 278 agreement to Devon County Council prior to the commencement of development, and the completion of this agreement at a trigger point to be confirmed. Footway to one side of Kellens Lane to be completed and Kellens Lane to be open to through traffic on foot cycle prior to the occupation of any dwellings on the application site. Carriageway on Kellens Lane, including the footway to the other side, to be completed and Kellens Lane to be open to vehicular traffic prior to the occupation of the 15th dwelling on the application site. The application for reserved matters consent to include details of a continuous footway through the site, linking the footway on Radford Way and the footway on Kellens Lane, together with the details of the timing of the implementation and completion of this footway in relation to the occupation of the proposed dwellings. Proposed public open space and landscaping and suds drainage provided on site pursuant to the reserved matters consent to be maintained and managed in perpetuity, likely by a management company. So those are the heads of terms, Chairman. Finally, slight addendum to condition 21 is proposed with the addition of the words above base to the end. Members will note from my report that that is a condition relating to lighting on the site. The intention being that lighting to the northern and western boundaries, which are hedging, is minimised in order to allow them to be maintained as dark corridors. Clearly, those boundaries are already lit to an extent because there is development to the north and west already, but the intention is that the development is sensitive to them insofar as it can be, and therefore tries to keep those boundaries as dark as possible for the benefit of nocturnal creatures. And that, Chairman, is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a very comprehensive report. Members of the committee, have you got questions for the planning officer? Councillor Moody.
Thank you very much for the report. Very comprehensive and easy to follow. Just one question on the approved scheme, the extant scheme.
Yep.
Can you just explain what the contributions were agreed with that scheme? Are you able to give me that information?
I don't have that information in front of me, but I can provide it.
But I believe the contributions were agreed with that,
They were,
with
yes.
that scheme.
Yes.
It would be helpful to know what they were.
Councillor Mott.
Thank you, Chair. I have several, please, if you will indulge me. Sorry, because I'm going to ask about the extant permission as well. Can I, sorry, that's a question for the developer, I believe they're speaking. Can I ask, please, what weight we can give to the parameter plans that have been submitted as part of this application?
It is open to us to refer to them in conditions if we so wish. They are only parameter plans. They're not binding. We can disregard them if we so wish, but they do indicate a way in which the development could come forward, and we can secure compliance with them if we so wish. I have referred to at least one of them in the conditions relating to the provision of open space.
Thank you. You mentioned about securing the adoption of the highway. Can I ask what section that refers to, please? Because I see from the photo that you showed of the where all the Harris fencing and things have gone up, that a significant amount of the highway has been blocked off already. Can you tell me if that section has been adopted? Yes, so I can see that's been blocked off.
Yes.
But you mentioned that it had already been adopted. My understanding is that it's the section effectively what was the old hedgerow that hasn't been adopted. But I see that there's quite a large section. You showed an overhead photo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which shows quite a large section of the highway that has been blocked off.
So this section here broadly is the section of land within the applicant's ownership. I don't believe there is a Section 38 agreement on any of that land currently. There is a Section 38 agreement with the county to the north. This is the Persimmon development, and there is a draft Section 38, I believe, for the remaining part of Kellens Lane to the east, but there is certainly no agreement that includes the applicants as landowners of this section. So, subject to
Sorry, I appreciate the road that was constructed, that's already constructed there, was given under a previous permission when the other houses that were there were developed. So I'm struggling to understand why that section of road hadn't been adopted with that other construction and the completion of that.
Well, I believe when the different phases of development have been undertaken with different developers in Kellens Lane. Yeah. The development. This section of Kellens Lane is associated with the field on which the development is now proposed. Because that development has never come forward, I don't believe the road access has been completed. There is certainly no Section 38 agreement for this section of Kellens Lane. The earlier application for 43 units also stopped short of the hedge, so did not provide for the Kellens Lane connection through, which this application does. We've been through the planning history, myself and the council solicitor, in some forensic detail. The site history and the history of the estate is convoluted, to say the least. And there have been many, many planning applications and variations of planning permissions on this site. But certainly, to the best of our research, and that includes talking to county highways, there is no Section 38 agreement already on this section of land.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just make the point? You would have seen on the site visit, the top surface of that road has never been laid. So it's not the same as the road either side. There's a sort of top surface that needs to be completed before the highway is intact, if I could put it that way.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. That certainly helps. Can you confirm, please, what the density that the land could accommodate, please?
That's a difficult question to answer without having the layout. The earlier application stated 60 units. This is 444022 OPA. The earlier application stated that there will be 60 units proposed on the site. That is a density that is commensurate with Stock Park to the east, pretty similar. Whether the site will accommodate 60 units now is difficult to say. Obviously, it depends upon a satisfactory layout and details coming forward at reserve matter stage.
Thank you. My apologies, Chair. I have a few more. Can you confirm, please, the access, or the extent of the access? Because it's not very clear on the drawings that have been submitted. Are we just looking at approving access through that route with no further detail? Or is there detail of how far the access would extend into the site?
As far as I'm concerned, Chairman, this is the detail of access, which simply indicates that the main estate road will come in through Radford Way, and this section of roadway is the extent of the detail proposed at this stage. So a section of 15 to 20 metres of road into the site. That is the means of access proposed.
Okay, thank you. You also mentioned when you were discussing about the footway access and things like that, that there was no timeline given for that. So we could be looking at potentially 6 years should permission be granted today, is that correct?
This is the footways on Kellens Lane?
Yeah, well, any of the footways, yeah.
None of the footways on Kellens Lane will be triggered by the commencement of development. None of these works would be required to be carried out until or unless the development is commenced.
Okay. And can I just confirm, please, because you stated about our lack of 5-year land supply. I appreciate and accept that. However, the figures that we've been given are based on unconstrained development and unconstrained access. We are very constrained with our land. So I think it's sometimes a bit disingenuous of us to suggest that we only have a 2.5-year supply when those numbers are based on an unconstrained development, and we have constraints with the National Park and the Tamar Valley restrictions that we have. I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Very much. Any other questions for the planning officer at this stage? Councillor Jury.
Yes, can I ask a question that relates to the existing planning permission that is in place, which, as I understand it, allowed for access both from this direction and from the Kellens Lane end. But I saw a note in your very good report which said that planning application red line doesn't include the Kellens Lane end, and so am I therefore led to understand that there's a possibility that if we don't agree what's on the table today, the resolution of the Kellens Lane situation is likely to get even more complicated and take even longer. Would that be a fair assessment?
As I said to Councillor Mott, we have no control over Kellens Lane currently, other than via the approval of this application, and then we are beholden to a developer to carry it out, and that would then trigger the requirement to complete the works to Kellens Lane. This is the layout for the earlier reserve matter scheme for 43 units. So yeah, there was an access proposed out onto Kellens Lane, but certainly in reviewing the planning history, the red line stopped short. The northern end of Kellens Lane, the red line stopped short, and therefore allowed for the retention of the hedge. So it would not have allowed, should I say, for the Kellens Lane connection, even if it was to be carried out.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Planning Officer at this stage? Councillor Mott.
Sorry, yeah, so I would just like to confirm then the red lines on these various schemes. So the approved scheme goes up to the hedge, but the current scheme includes the hedge. Are you saying then that the developer has effectively purchased the hedge?
So if I can show you, we're talking a line thickness. This is the difficulty with red lines.
I understand that, because that's why we're in this particular situation that we are now.
If I can just take back. So this is the situation as it was about a year ago. The gabion baskets, I believe, are consistent with the hedge. So the current application includes half the hedge, if you like, and therefore, as far as I'm aware, takes into account the ransom strip, which is where the gabion baskets are shown here. In discussion with the County Council, the land immediately to the north of this is already covered by a Section 38 agreement, so County are confident that there is no intervening land.
Okay. Are we all done with questions for the Planning Officer at this stage? Okay, we will move on to our... We haven't answered.
Sorry, Councillor. I asked the question, what were the contributions in the previous planning application?
I've quickly scanned through the Section 106 agreement that went with the 2012 approval. Obviously, development finance has moved significantly from 2012 to now. But in that, as far as I can see, it was 40% affordable, £700 per open market dwelling to community facilities, and I haven't drilled down to what the definition of that was, and 6,068 per open market dwelling for education contributions. I can't see any other contributions in that agreement, but I hasten to add that was 2012, and in terms of viability, things have moved on significantly in that time.
Thanks for that. That's really helpful.
Okay. Right.
I just do have one. I'm still, based on Councillor Mott's question, I still have this issue about the previous planning included vehicle access to Kellens Road, and this one doesn't. And I'm still not quite certain about the red lines that we're talking about, because when I'm looking at the map that you showed with the red line, it included Kellens Road for the 2012 application. So I don't know whether anybody else is in the same position. I'm just a little confused about, so we've got planning permission with vehicle access to Kellens Road, which is extant. It has contributions on that extant application as well. This current one is for exactly the same red line, but no vehicle access onto Kellens Road. Am I correct in that?
I think you are, but I mean...
You are. I mean, we have an extant permission for 43 dwellings, which has not been implemented. I think in the light of Vickery Holman's viability assessment, I think the question I'd ask myself is if that development is now viable. Because simply because we've approved something subject to 106 doesn't imply it is still a viable proposition for a developer. And it's difficult to see in light of Vickery Holman's that it could be, but for whatever reason it hasn't come forward. So I'm not sure it offers a more deliverable proposition than the application we've got in front of us now. With regard to the highways issue, yes, that scheme allowed for road connections both to the north and to the south of the site, as you can see here. So you've got part of the site being accessed to the north onto Kellens Lane and part of the site being accessed, or part of the development being accessed onto Radford Way, which obviously was acceptable to highways at that time, but equally the application that is now tabled, which solely proposes access onto Radford Way, is also acceptable to county highways, as was the application before it, 440 22 OPA, which although effectively went to appeal because we were unhappy, or not unhappy, there were matters to be resolved related to the Section 106 agreement and so on, and contributions. There was no objection from county highways to the access arrangements in that case either. So, in our view...
at the risk of muddying the waters, which I hope I won't do, there's nothing to stop a developer putting in another proposal for a scheme, even though there is an extant approval on the table. And I think that's really what we're saying in this case, is there was an approved scheme. The developer has, for reasons we might wish to ask him, decided not to conduct that development, has put in an alternative proposal, which we're now discussing today. I hope that helps. Councillor Leach, I thought it would.
Not sure if this is relevant, but it might be worth pointing out that the work that has been done on Kellens Lane wasn't done by this developer. That was done by the development next door. So they had to have, I think it's all their services had to come in that way. So it was, I'm not quite sure if it was a contract, but they were contracted to actually finish that road. They didn't. And I understand there was issues with the Section 38 where one party hadn't actually signed it. Hence, it's come to this sort of end. But it wasn't this developer who did the work so far.
Okay, I think we have exhausted ourselves with the planning officer for the time being. We'll move on to the registered speakers, and the first one is Mrs. Mortimer on behalf of the Baldwin Drive residents. So, Ms. Mortimer, good. Kathy will show you where the... Thank you very much. You have 3 minutes to say your piece, and could I advise you to pull that unit sort of as close to you as you can, and sort of speak into the stick that's sticking up, and then we'll all hear you clearly. Thanks very much. When you're ready, off you go.
Hello. Hi, I'm Susan Mortimer, resident of Baldwin Drive. Obviously, things are coming to light here this morning, which we weren't sort of quite aware of. And whilst I've registered as an objector to the planning application, I totally understand the position of this site in that it's completely surrounded by residential housing. effectively landlocked as such, and agree that the site is suitable in principle for future development. Our issue really, from the residents of Baldwin Drive, is about the access to the site again, which is obviously what we're really talking about. And our understanding that Kellens Lane was going to be open as a vehicular access, the same as Baldwin Drive. But it now looks, from the latest plans, that you're sending everything from the Baldwin Drive end. Historically, the site was originally earmarked for a new primary school, going back to the very beginning. And it was recommended at that time that the access would only be through Kellens Lane, from what I can understand. So they were going to just come from the bottom and not from the top end. The historical site of entry behind the Berlin Wall in Kellens Lane, if you look at it on that picture as you come up, there is like the hammerhead entry, isn't there, which looks as though it was built in preparation to come in from the Kellens Lane end. And I believe that the local residents there have long understood that that was what it was going to be. We were going to come in from that end. Baldwin Drive already serves about 3 housing cul-de-sacs up there at the moment. You know, we have a lot of traffic going in and out. We have 2 care homes in Baldwin Drive, which are in constant use. I don't know whether people are aware of, you know, that type of use in our road. From the planning application details, there is a letter from the Highway Authority dated the 15th of August this year, so quite recently, which seems to suggest that access from Kellens Lane will be secured through a Section 106 agreement. Now, to a layperson, I don't know what that means, but it did look as though that there would be access through from Kellens Lane. I believe their preferred option, being the Highway Authority, would be to have a permeable site with free-flowing traffic in both ways, so that people can get to the St James Primary School at the bottom, the new railway link, and of course our new proposed supermarket at the top of Exeter Road, I hope. Are they? Oh, sorry. So really, can you please advise why the Kellens Lane access provision has been admitted and why the council has decided to go against the Highway Authority, which seems to indicate from that letter?
We have an opportunity to ask you questions. So from the committee, are there any questions for Mrs Mortimer? Councillor Moody.
I'd like to give you the opportunity to expand on the Highways letter that you referred to.
I have a copy here from the planning.
Would you just like to explain it again, your understanding?
The document is on the planning application. This is where I've retrieved it from. Would it help if I read it, or I don't know?
Pertinent part. So obviously it's a 2-page.
Yes.
But just the pertinent part.
It says, the previous application for a school, Devon County Council recommended that no vehicle access from Baldwin Drive, and for this to be pedestrian cycles only, and the vehicle access to be through Kellens Lane. The proposed layout, as illustrated in the transport statement, suggests a shared surface for the entire development. Right, so the applicant has not responded to the concerns previously raised regarding site access. The current proposal continues to show vehicular access solely via Radford Way, with Kellens Way designated for pedestrian use only. This is contrary to the position of the local planning authority, which has confirmed that vehicular access via Kellens Way will be secured through a Section 106 agreement. This legal mechanism will ensure that Kellens Way is formally incorporated into the development as a point of vehicular access, and the applicant should revise the proposal accordingly to reflect this requirement. Furthermore, the indicative site layout plan submitted as part of the application cannot be supported in its current form. The layout must remain flexible and capable of being amended to ensure the provision of a continuous footway throughout the site, promoting safe and inclusive pedestrian movement. The final design should prioritise connectivity and accessibility, aligning with active travel principles and wider planning objectives.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
I think I'd just like the planning officer to respond to that. You have spoken with Highways, I understand.
Chairman, we've had obviously detailed discussions with Highways. A number of points arise from that. So the letter that the objectors referred to, Mrs. Mortimer has referred to, does not draw attention to the last planning application, which was 444022 OPA, which also included Radford Way as the key estate road access into the site. There'd been a change of highway officers in the meantime. I think the reference to Kellens Lane is about providing Kellens Lane as a through route, rather than necessarily using Kellens Lane to access the application site. The highway officer in her letter that's referred to certainly took issue with the indicative layout that has been supplied and was concerned that this showed a shared surface access road through the site with pedestrians effectively walking on the carriageway rather than providing footways for pedestrian use through the site. And it was partly on that basis that I have ensured that it is only indicative. And as I've emphasised in my presentation, we will not be approving it as an approved plan or indicating it is acceptable. Beyond that, I can only refer to more recent discussions with Highways. The highway officer's current recommendation raises certainly no objection to the means of access as are shown on the plan I tabled, which just shows a stub of additional roadway and the continuation of Radford Way to access the site. The highway officer is certainly very keen too on providing permeability through the site and the inclusion of a footway, which was discussed. Members who attended the site visit earlier in the week was discussed at that point. I can shed no more light on the matter, but as I say, Highways do not object to the application as now tabled, with the details now tabled, and is happy to support approval subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. And if it's any help, I was party to that discussion on site where the Highways officer said she had no objections to the current application from an access point of view. Any other questions for Mrs. Mortimer from the committee? Councillor Jury.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Very helpful. I have to say I'm kind of personally more drawn to having an access at Kellens Lane as well as the one that's being shown. And I suppose in some ways I'm motivated in that by trying to sort out the whole Kellens Lane situation. But I just wonder whether you had any view as to whether that might be a double-edged sword. In other words, creating through traffic that brings more traffic down Baldwin's Road, going through to the other side in Kellens Lane and coming out, I guess, down near the new junior school. Whether you have any view on that, and whether perhaps Councillor Leach, with his better knowledge of the geography, might also have a view on that.
We've got you as a registered speaker. Perhaps you could cover that when you
Come back to that then.
understand. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Mrs. Mortimer? No, thank you very much. Our next registered speaker is Mr. Jewson, who is the developer's agent. I think I've got that right. Pleased to hear exactly the same rules apply. 3 minutes to address the committee, and then we'll have the opportunity to ask you questions. So when you're ready, off you go.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. My name is Ian Jewson. I am the agent representing the applicant for this proposal. As you've heard from the planning officer, this site has got an extensive planning history, but it's obviously important that this application is determined on its own merits. You've also heard that the site is within a settlement boundary, surrounded on all sides by residential development, and the principle of residential development has already been accepted. This is just an application for outline permission with access. All other matters, including layout, will be determined at the reserved matters stage. You've also heard about the issues of viability, and I can assure you that the applicant has provided robust viability evidence, and that has been prepared in accordance with government guidance and undertaken to RICS rules. The council has reviewed that information using its own independent appointed expert and has concluded that the development would be unviable with the full range of 106 obligations applied. But despite the obvious viability issues, the application will deliver some very important benefits, as you've heard. Firstly, the missing link on Kellens Lane. Secondly, the delivery of much needed market housing, which will help ease the pressure of the locally declared housing crisis, and also your 5-year land supply. Thirdly, there will be an economic benefit in terms of direct and indirect jobs due to the construction of this site, and then the future residents providing spend in the local area. All of these issues are very important and significant benefits. Despite the fact that the application was found to be unviable, the applicant has offered to provide 2 social rented units. I have noted the local objections and listened to Mrs. Mortimer. As you've seen from the officer's report, those matters have been taken into account but do not constitute reasons to refuse this planning application. As I've said, the benefits do, however, weigh very heavily in favour of granting permission. From the applicant's perspective, they are very keen to see this application approved and want to proceed as soon as possible should you be able to recommend and agree the recommendation today. They have already provided a draft legal agreement to officers, and their intention will be to sign that as soon as possible in an acceptable form should you agree the recommendation. Thank you very much.
Councillor Mott.
Thank you. You've mentioned, and it's been mentioned several times, about the extant permission for this site. Can you explain, please, why that's not been progressed? And I note in the report that it states that the earlier permission has not proved to be marketable thus far. Can I ask what evidence has been submitted to support that, please?
We need to bear in mind that this is an old permission, so things have moved on significantly in the market. The applicant has not provided, nor is required to provide any evidence of whether or not that permission is marketable. It is their choice to develop the land in the way they see appropriate based on current market conditions, and that is the application before you today. It's for reasons for viability that the application has been, or the proposals have been reviewed, and this version put before you today.
I will direct that then to the officer later. Can I ask, please, why the road access through Kellens Lane is only going to be deliverable at the 15th occupation of the site, please? Why is it not sooner?
That is for practicality reasons and for reasons of viability. So in terms of cash flow, it's important that this site can proceed on a viable way, and that trigger was seen to be an appropriate trigger. I understand that actually different triggers were agreed through the previous appeal and were seen to be acceptable, but the applicant has agreed with the officer's suggestions about the triggers that are before you today.
Okay, but I think just really for clarity for those that are listening and the residents that are going to be affected, that could be anywhere from 6 to 10 years yet.
The timing will be down to obviously whether or not permission is granted today, and if it is, how quickly reserved matters can be approved, and then there will be a site start and gearing up on site and then dealing with health and safety issues. So there will be a time lag. That link cannot be provided immediately, but it will be delivered as soon as possible based on the triggers, which, as I say, the applicant agrees are appropriate.
I think, again, though, for clarity for those that are listening that are unexperienced in the processes and the times that it could be, bearing in mind that if an outline was to be granted today, you have then up to 3 years to submit a reserved matters application, and then another 3 years before that can then be enacted, before it has to come back before the planning authority. Therefore, the reality is it could be between 6 and 10 years, depending on how quickly the site is developed out once it's started. So I just wanted to clarify that for residents that might be listening in onto this and their expectations on when that might be delivered.
I couldn't say categorically whether it will be within that range, but it will be a number of years before that link is delivered, yes.
Any other questions for Mr. Jewson? I have one. The previous application, which we've mentioned today, had a sizable quantum of affordable housing attached to it. This one has very much less. In your view, what are the forces that have acted on the viability of this proposal that have so dramatically reduced the ability of the developer to bring forward affordable housing?
This is in my general experience, so I say I'm not a viability expert, so I can't comment on detail in the figures within the viability exercise that's been undertaken, but there has been a rapid rise in construction costs over the last 5 years, which has taken the development industry by surprise to an extent. Development has become extremely difficult, and that is down to labour costs and construction costs. And obviously we have a different scheme here with more units as well, and that's where the balancing act is of trying to find the right product. But construction costs are probably the biggest issue for viable schemes at this current time in the planning system.
And maybe just a supplementary to that, is there anything specific about this site which makes it difficult to develop?
Again, I'm not a construction expert, so this is something I'm sort of perhaps not qualified to comment on. But this is a greenfield site that has various burdens to deal with, both in terms of construction costs and also there's infrastructure costs because of delivery of Kellen's Lane. But other than that, no other burdens other than the normal burdens that a lot of sites are going through at the moment. And I'm sure this committee has probably seen other schemes that are struggling for viability as well. It is the nature of the industry at the moment.
Yes, I think, again, for members or for people listening to this committee who may be concerned that developments are now unable to provide the affordable quantum that we've locked into our joint local plan, would want to know the reasons behind that. So thank you very much for that. Any other questions for Mr. Jewson? Councillor Lillich.
Is it the intention of your client to actually build out this development themselves?
I think there are options, and I don't think a decision has been made yet. They are housing developers, so I think their starting point would be to develop out the scheme themselves. I think it's not for me to say today that they wouldn't necessarily consider an offer from another developer should that be appropriate, but the starting point is they are housing developers and they have developed in the past.
Councillor Leach, I'm advised by my legal advisor that you did say at the beginning of the committee that you weren't going to take part in the debate, but you would speak, so there. Any other questions for Mr. Jewson? No, thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Councillor Mott.
If I may, please, I noticed through the report, or I couldn't find any, so my apologies if it's in there, and I've missed it, about any biodiversity net gain connected with this site.
I believe it's certainly a section in the officer's report regarding BNG, and the appropriate levels of BNG will be provided across the site. I believe there's a condition relating to a landscape ecology management plan as well.
Final ask for Mr. Jewson? No, thank you very much. We now have a statement which Mrs Hall will read out from Oakhampton Hamlets Council.
Thank you, Chair. The Oakhampton Hamlets clerk has said that no councillors are able to attend, so they put this small piece together at their last PC meeting, and it states councillors are not sure on their availability to attend the committee meeting, so a proposal was made by Councillor Goffey that should the development go ahead, Kellens Lane should be fully opened before building works are commenced to allow access for all. This was seconded by Councillor Cooper and agreed by all.
Thank you very much. Obviously, they're not here, so we can't question them, so we'll take that statement as read. We've now got statements from the ward members, and somewhat unusually, both ward members want to speak, which they're quite entitled to do. So I will ask Councillor Leach, perhaps, to go first. You know the routine. You have 5 minutes.
I'll do my best. I'll do my best to also get it at my voice. Firstly, I need to say that the decision to develop this site was established some years ago. It's been said already today. It was in the Old Town Plan in the core strategy, now the joint local plan. So this is not in dispute. I'd also like to congratulate Mr. Whitehead for his very full and concise report, especially for all the details in the 21 conditions. The first planning consent was for a primary school. I believe this did not happen due to DCC not agreeing to certain conditions for this to happen. This decision has caused all our problems in this area to this day. The second planning application was agreed by literally everybody, well, maybe not everybody, was for a development that was to split the site in half. You showed the plan up there just now, with access both from Kellens Lane and Baldwin Drive, with no access across each side except for foot and bicycles. As the report states, this is something that did give up, still can't do, as they had already made a start. I fully understand the reasons for the officer's recommendations, but my reasons for calling this application in are on the report, and I've actually shown the policy references there. I believe that when it comes to the 106 contributions that have been put forward here, it falls a long way short of what we should expect to receive. We have 2 reports that show that the site is not viable if more is provided. But I can't understand how a similar small development that has just been completed on the edge of the town with 50 properties provided over 20, I think it's more than this, 20% affordable properties plus other contributions, plus they had the additional expense of having to pump all the waste water off that site permanently. And this application, I want you to put here, just allows for 2 small houses. Although this application is just an outline planning and only consists of the offer, so it's outlined, all other details will be left when the reserved matters come forward. I think that should the site only have one access via Baldwin Drive, this will have a very serious cumulative traffic effect on the quiet enjoyment of the residents of this small development. Redesigning the layout and I'll go off piece. The reason that they can't go out at Kellens Lane is the attenuation pond, which is on the plans right down in that corner. But I believe with some engineering ideas put into it, that pond should still be, it could be replaced or further up the site, and then open the site for the two roads at either side, which will give certainly access in very, very bad weather for people to take children straight to the school instead of just having a footpath. It is unfortunate that the highways cannot have an alternative view of what the additional traffic will create. When it comes to Kellens Lane, having the blocked section of Kellens Lane joined up with this application for our S106 agreement is at least helpful. However, the trigger points in the agreement should be at the same time as the trigger point for the public footpath and not leave the road until the 15th house. From a practical point of view, as well as an economic one, it must make more sense to complete both footpaths and road at the same time as all the other main works, groundworks are being installed. Bringing the equipment back just for Kellens Lane is not a sensible way to go, and even harder to enforce, as we're finding with a section of road on the other side of the blockage. Another option, I'll try, another option could be to include in this agreement, either as a condition or part of the 106, is that the present developer must immediately complete the block section of road as soon as this application, should his application be agreed, and it should be also subject to the highways. It's very clear that the residents of Kellens Lane area have had enough of this issue, and after I've had personally tried to solve the issue for at least 8 years, I can't blame them for becoming more militant. It is not fair that we should leave these things as they are for what could be some many years to come, even if this goes through. And basically what we're doing is we're almost forcing the community to trespass, cause criminal damage just to keep their children safe from using very slippery slopes and dangerous shortcuts up and down a very busy road, no footpaths. It's a miracle we've not had a serious accident so far. It's now time to make a stand and resolve this issue once and for all with or without this present application.
Right, questions for Councillor Leach from the committee. Bearing in mind we do have Councillor Dexter en route. Councillor Jury.
Can I refer back to my previous question and get your views on whether opening the Kellens Lane end as per the extant permission might actually lead to more traffic going through that route through Baldwin's Lane?
I've got a few seconds now. When the bungalow estate, we can go back to that, if you can find it, when that was put forward, that was the concern. So you had access in from both sides, and that stopped traffic coming straight through Baldwin Drive. And when, and I still call it the Kellens Lane estate, not what is locally known as, when that was built to the right of this estate, for Baldwin Drive, it was decided that no traffic would come the other way. So you get Baldwin Drive as a cul-de-sac. You can walk, you can pedal, you can take your prams through, but you can't use vehicles through. And that was because everyone recognised as a required estate. I'll get told off for saying this. It's quite a few people are probably retired there. They said, and they did so for a reason, and we've got these care homes. So having extra traffic coming down there was thought to not be a good idea way back. So I still think if the attenuation point is moved up, that could go up and still have some road issue so that you don't have that cross traffic.
Okay. Any other questions?
Where's the attenuation pond on that map? Saw that on this application, but where is it on that application?
There was.
There wasn't.
Because the sorry, because planning has changed, attenuation ponds weren't required at that time. Now they are.
Okay, thanks very much. I just, at this point, perhaps remind committee members that we're discussing the application that's in front of us, not the application that we might wish to be in front of us. Right. I now call Councillor Dexter.
Thank you, Chair.
Asked if you pop up here.
I'll do that then, okay.
As you know, you two have 5 minutes. So when you're ready, off you go.
Thank you. I'd just like to make 2 points, so it won't take, hopefully, 5 minutes. And it's to reinforce what's already been said about the single access through Radford Way, increasing the traffic through Baldwin's. Now that Baldwin, as has already been mentioned, goes on to Exeter Road, and this is going to add traffic to that quiet road. And I don't think that's really a very good idea, and the residents are, I think, quite reasonably concerned about that. So we're strongly in support that there should be an access through to Kellens Lane, for the reasons that have been stated quite a few times already. So dealing with the Kellens Lane blockage, the so-called Berlin Wall, if you look at the plan itself, there's no logistical connection between Kellens Lane and the site itself. There's no, I understand it's owned by the applicant, but the two things are not connected. And I take Councillor Mott's point and agree wholeheartedly with it, that if we tie it too closely with this, we're now going to be looking at that blockage on Kellens Lane lasting for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, which is frankly intolerable. And I think that this committee should strongly consider breaking that blockade now as part of this. I don't see any reason whatsoever why that blockage should not be broken immediately. It forms no part of any detailed application for that. And I think on that particular point, I'll rest within about 2 minutes. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions for Councillor Dexter? Councillor Jury.
Thank you. I share your views about breaking that connection between the Kellens Lane blockage and this site, but I'm not entirely sure myself how we actually do that within this committee. Have you got any thoughts or suggestions? I mean, I would hasten to add that, and maybe I shouldn't, or maybe I won't. I will let my question rest there. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to respond to that, Councillor Dexter?
I'm not a planning expert, but it does seem to me that this is an outline application, and the applicant is choosing to link these two things together. So it's, I would guess, within the power of this committee to make a decision on that linkage and take an appropriate way forward.
Thank you. I'll pick that up in a minute with the planning officer, but any other questions at this stage for Councillor Dexter? No? Okay, thanks very much. Well, we've had an opportunity to hear all the speakers and question them. We now shortly will move into debate, and then we will go to a vote. But just as the nexus of this conversation has been all around whether or not Kellens Lane should be opened, how it can be opened, and what have you, just to clear up in my own mind, were the committee minded to do something to restore the carriageway in Kellen's Lane, or make access to the development site via Kellen's Lane as well as Radford Way, is that something that could be secured by condition or not at this stage?
There are a few questions there, aren't there? with regard to vehicular access into the application site via Kellen's Lane, that is not what's tabled. Take advice from legal if needs be, but my view is that what has been tabled is vehicular access solely from Radford Way. That has been found acceptable by DCC, our Highways Authority. And that is the application on which the applicant is expecting a decision. I don't believe we can impose a condition that requires access to be provided from another route. If members are unsatisfied by the proposed access, the option is refusal. But as I say, that would be totally at odds with the advice of the Highway Authority, both in relation to this application and the last one, and would therefore not be a resolution I would suggest the committee takes. With regard to footways and vehicular access via Kellen's Lane and making that a through route, that was being picked up by various members in questions just now, and obviously both ward members. There are two issues there. This was discussed in detail in relation to the last application and in the inspector's appeal decision. As case officer in that application, I made the case that Kellen's Lane should be opened up as early as possible, and at the commencement of development. The inspector disagreed with me and therefore with the LPA. Her view was that it was reasonable for us to secure a pedestrian route from the application site, so from the proposed development here, onto Kellen's Lane and then off north. So to create a footway all the way through from Radford Way effectively to the north point of the applicant's ownership, which is the red line on Kellen's Lane, because that was required to allow pedestrians connectivity to local facilities, the shops, the school, etc., which is what would be expected as part of securing sustainable development. Where she disagreed with us was in requiring the carriageway and effectively the other footway to be opened at the period of commencement. Her view, and I think on reflection I would agree with her, is that opening Kellen's Lane is not necessary to make this development acceptable. Kellen's Lane is a through route to the existing estate development to the east and to the north. The development of the houses on this site could go ahead irrespective of it. So whilst she agreed it was a community benefit and it was a reasonable community benefit for us to secure, she was not of the view that it was intrinsically related to this development. So she actually agreed with the appellants that the time for bringing that forward did not necessarily have to be so early in the build process because it wasn't meeting a requirement to make the development acceptable. And she agreed with the trigger point that was offered by the appellants at that time, which was by the 15th dwelling. And this is on that basis, I believe, that the applicants are offering a similar trigger point this time because it was found acceptable in relation to the last appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very clear. I'm glad we've got your view on that. So we are now in debate before we go to a vote. So if anyone wish to say anything before we go to the vote?
Sorry, Chair, if I can just have a final question. You just said that the inspector said that as it was already a through route in Kellen's Lane, it is not already a through route. Can I just get clarity on that, please?
As I've got the appeal decision on the screen in front of me, I think I probably can provide that.
Thank
that clarity. So there are a number of paragraphs that it might be useful for me to go through. There's only about 3 or 4 to go through them. That's fine, but I think it's better for the committee to understand it. So this is directly from the appeal decision on the previous application. So the barrier across Kellens Lane currently necessitates significant diversions by vehicles and pedestrians for both trips within the estate and trips linking Exeter Road to the south with Crediton Road to the north. The proposal could open up Kellens Lane to provide good pedestrian and cycling connectivity from the site to existing developed areas and nearby green spaces, as well as St James Primary School, thus providing compliance with the JLP policy Dev 10 in this regard. The link through Kellens Lane is required for pedestrians and cyclists as part of the appeal scheme, not for vehicular traffic. However, it is proposed to ensure that the link is provided to allow free passenger vehicles, as it is an important piece of road network to promote connectivity and minimise journey length and congestion in the surrounding area. I consider that the Kellens Lane link upgrade specifically to facilitate vehicular usage instead of only for pedestrian and cycle movements would go beyond that strictly necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, but would nonetheless be a worthwhile benefit that should be secured by the development. Does that answer the question? So effectively, the inspector's saying you absolutely need cycling and pedestrian routes from the site. Opening up Kellens Lane to vehicular traffic is a good thing for the wider area, the wider community, but not strictly necessary for this development. But it is right for this development, brings it forward. Effectively, that's my reading of effectively what's said.
Thank you, and I'm sorry to labour this point. Why did the previous extant permission not deliver that through road?
Because the red line was not consistent with the boundary with the Persimmon development to the north. There was a ransom strip within the middle, or a strip of land excluded from the red line in the middle, which is now consistent with the ransom strip.
And again, I'm sorry to labour this point, but looking at that red line there and the red line that you displayed earlier for the extant permission, they are both the same.
It's a line thickness. The line I showed on the reserve matters is actually slightly different to the one on the outline application. So we're not comparing like with like. This is an outline application. The red line on the outline application for the 43 house scheme is slightly different. There is a line, but it is a line thickness, I appreciate.
Okay, I'm not going to make you go back to the previous one, but from what, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that is looking at the two slides and seeing no difference in them.
I can assure members that a number of senior officers, both planning and legal, have gone through this with extremely carefully. I was going to say with a fine-tooth comb, and I think that's probably appropriate. And for whatever reason, the planning permissions from 2012 and before do not quite line up, and there is a piece of land, as Peter says, that's in between, that falls outside of any of the planning permissions, and that's where the difficulty lies. It is, I think, probably was the thickness of a line, but it's something that happened some 12, 13, 14 years ago, I'm afraid.
I think those that were on the site visit would have noted that that corner, if I can put it, is a minute part of the entire site. So it's quite easily within the thickness of a line, I think. Right, have we done with debate? Councillor Moody.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I still am confused about the red line. Possibly the slide that we have there is not accurate. Not this one, but the previous one isn't accurate. To me, they just look exactly the same red line. No, I just wanted to raise some issues about our policies, DV7, 8, that we require affordable housing. This application is well below that, and that's been discussed regarding the viability case. It doesn't set out to address the rising housing need and the affordable housing in Oakhampton. Under SBT2, the JLP policy requires a balance of sizes and tenures. This application, I believe, fails on that, giving only 2 socially rented properties, and I understand that there's viability again. The Section 106 is a concern to me about education, public transport, and playing pitches, etc. Yet again, it's the viability. And as I've said before, the site has an approved scheme that did have contributions, but yet again, viability. But one of the most important things for me, notwithstanding the highways view, is the adverse cumulative effect on the Baldwin Drive residents. And I believe that their amenity has not been protected during this process. But that's all I've got to say, that I have some serious concerns about those issues. I know we've discussed them, but thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I feel we've had a pretty open debate about this development. Any other points? Councillor Jerry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I share some of the concerns of my colleague, and I guess the rest of us probably sitting around this table, that this all feels quite uncomfortable. I'd come back on, my understanding is that we're actually only considering here the access question and not the question of all the reserved matters and Section 106. But it is of concern that the card of viability has been played, and it's a wider concern, I think, that we've got a site here that has an extant planning permission that everybody accepted at the time. It's a greenfield site that doesn't look particularly difficult in a highly sustainable area with local amenities and a new railway line. So the market value of those properties ought to be pretty good. And yet the developer is coming back and saying at this point that they can't make the normal contributions to Section 106, including affordable housing. So that's obviously a concern. But I think we have to address what we're looking at here in terms of the application, which is about access. And the carrot is being dangled in front of us, I think, of solving the Kellens Lane situation. And that, if truth be told, also makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable, because I think it has been within the remit of some of the people who are making this application to have solved that problem potentially some time ago, and by doing that have generated a considerable amount of goodwill, which has been failed to do so. So I'm somewhat conflicted that I see this as a way of potentially getting things moving to resolve that situation, but I do feel we're being played a little. I'll leave it at that.
I may have missed, Councillor Joy, I apologise if I misheard, but you're absolutely, in terms of the application, the development, what we're considering, what the application is considering is the residential use of the land in principle and the access. Absolutely right, that's what's in front of us. So things like the detailed design and the absolute mix isn't. There are parameter plans that show one way of dealing with it, but that's not. But the one thing, but the Section 106 absolutely is part of this application. That's not part to the next one, because any Section 106 has to go with the development of the land in principle. So the issues around the level of affordable housing and the level of contributions and the viability is absolutely part of the decision that's being made today. I may have misheard you, in which case I apologise.
No, you didn't, and thank you for clarifying that. That does, I think, complicate matters for us sitting here. because, as I see it, we're essentially saying there probably isn't an application that is in our books at the moment that could be deemed to be viable. I don't know whether that's actually what we're saying. And we do have a joint local plan, and we do have a number of policies within that plan, particularly about affordable housing. And we're effectively saying that we probably won't be able to meet any of those. Is that really what we're saying?
There are also policies in the local plan that, sorry, the joint local plan that also point to this is subject to viability. We have a previous appeal inspector that said on this application, on a very similar application, saying yes, I accept the viability. And whilst I'm not going to go into specific site-specific details, I'm not got time, but this isn't the only site that we're dealing with where our own advisors are telling us these sites are no longer viable, fundamentally for two predominantly things. I think Mr. Jewson touched on it. One, the absolute massive increase in build costs over the last 5 years. And the other thing that is now starting to come up is the cost of the national BNG requirement. And I've had a quick look through our own viability assessment for this site, and it's looking like they think that cost in itself will be somewhere in the region of 187,000. So that's starting to be not necessarily a problem, but it's certainly creating issues for smaller sites, and it's not within our gift to say no, you can't do it, because it's a national requirement. So I think whilst I'm not saying look at these poor developers, what I am saying, there is absolutely been a shift in the profit margin between build cost and sales values, because build cost has gone up significantly.
Councillor Mott.
My apologies, Councillor Drury. Did you want to come back on that before I speak?
No, I was only going to say I wasn't trying to pick an argument. I think we're on the same page. It's kind of frustrating that obviously, you know, the joint local plan exists. We I think might have good reasons to invoke some of the policies in the joint local plan, and essentially the message is coming over that it's pretty difficult to do that.
Apologies if I came across argumentative, I didn't mean to. And all officers would be, I can say, Hannah and I are equally as frustrated as to where we're going at the moment, not least with the imposition of we no longer have 5 years supply.
Councillor Mott, did you want to chip in at this stage?
Thank you. Yeah, I can only really echo a lot of what Councillor Drury has said, that I do feel that we're kind of being nudged into a decision that none of us are particularly comfortable with. While I appreciate there is already the principle for development on this site, that's not a problem, and I guess the devil will be in the detail with what comes forward in reserved matters, and the question of viability and the need to develop more houses, and the net gain and the increase in national insurance, and no doubt several other factors that will be coming down the line are putting more and more pressure on everybody to take these schemes that are no longer showing any viability and the ability to deliver the services that residents and the communities need because of factors that are being imposed on us from central government, which, as I say, is probably a discussion that's best left outside of this meeting. I can't say that I'm comfortable with what we're being asked to make a decision on today. I'm not sure that I'm quite there yet. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Guthrie.
I just would like to support everything particularly that has been brought to everyone's attention about the viability issue for sites, and I think that there's a big thing missing here, but it's not for this application, but I still want to state it, in that traditional building methods are outdated and outmoded, and I'd like to see a much greater approach that's applied across Europe and in many other places where house building can be done in a very different way, modularly using different techniques. And I think that sitting on planning committees, we're going to start having to get some better advice on looking at how to build housing. Because the traditional routes are too expensive and they're also outdated and outmoded. So I'd like to see that as a big part of our future plan.
Okay, thanks for that. But I bring us back to ground zero, if I can put it that way. We're looking at this application today, not an application that we might like to see in front of us. I think we're all disappointed that it, in one sense, is not policy compliant in the fact that it doesn't deliver affordable housing, which we so desperately need. However, it does generate housing, and it offers the potential for that unblocking of roadblock at the corner of the site, which I don't see any other application coming towards us that would do that. So I leave it there. I'm now prepared to go for the vote. Just to be absolutely clear, the officer's recommendation is for conditional approval subject to the completion of a legal agreement to secure a number of objectives which are in his report. So I ask the committee, those in favour of...
Mr. Chairman, is that a formal proposal?
Sorry, I propose that, the officer's recommendation for approval. Can I have a second for that? No? Yes?
I'll
Right.
second that.
You second it. Right. So we now go to the vote, and the vote is...
Sorry, Chairman, apologies. Can we just clarify that is as set out with the amendment to condition 21?
Yes, as is on the screen
Yes,
up there.
yes, thank you.
So we are now voting on whether we support the officer's recommendation. Those in favour of supporting the officer's recommendation for approval, please show. I've never seen hands go up quite so slowly, but how many have we got? 1,
That's
2,
6, Chair.
3, 4, 5, 6. Those against supporting the officer's recommendation? 1, 2. So the officer's recommendation is supported. Thank you very much.
And one abstention.
Sorry, one abstention?
Yes.
One abstention, Councillor Leach. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. Those listening to the debate, you're very welcome to stay if you want to hear the rest of the committee's business, but equally, if you'd like to make an exit, now's the time to do it. Okay, if we could settle back, we'll get going.
Neil, could you possibly turn that microphone off? Mike?
Okay, we're now on item 8, but my legal advisor tells me that I skipped a step earlier on, and I didn't ask for a vote on whether you accept the minutes. I just rather assumed you did. So do you all accept the minutes of the last meeting? He's now content, I think. Thank you very much.
No one saw.
I'll ignore that comment. Item 8, planning appeals update.
Thank you, Chair. By the end of this little lot, I'm sure you'll be absolutely fed up with hearing my dulcet tones, as we have a number of appeals to get through. I'll try and deal with, if there are any questions, I'll try and deal with them. If not, I might have to take them away and come back to you, because I don't know all of these sites. I know the first site relatively well. I've been there a few times, but after that, I don't know them too well. So, we'll start off with, how you put to say, an old favourite? East Bowlands. I'm sure we've had a number of, there's a number of applications coming here in the past. This particular application, that's the site. It was for a stable block with 5 stables, a tack room with veterinary medication store, and a storage at the end. See from the section, it was slightly dug into the existing ground and located in the corner of the site. So we'll go back to the site plan. It's in this corner of the site. The application was refused by officers on the basis that effectively character and appearance of the area, and whilst the inspector has summarised it, the second concern as overdevelopment of the site, it was that's correct, but it's to do with the volume of the site that is gradually getting covered with buildings. That was the concern. So the inspector identified those as the 2 main issues. And when dealing with those, the inspector said, as observed on my site visit, the boundaries of the appeal site, other than that to the north, already comprise well-established hedging and or mature trees that would largely screen the new building from public or long-range views. That would be supplemented by new hedgerow planting to the south and north. On the new northern boundary, a new hedge will be provided. And accepted that there is a nearby public bridleway, popular route, runs along the western boundary, but when the inspector walked the route, they are only able to get a glimpsed view of the appeal site from the pedestrian grate. So overall, they were satisfied that with it being dug in and relatively screened, that it wouldn't have an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the wider area. And the design of the building was, I suppose it was what it was. If you look at it, you'd know it's a stable building, and it's a building of that sort of character you'd expect in the rural area. In terms of the overdevelopment concern, we took the view that, as I say, that the additional land take of the appeal proposal, when considered in the context of the planning history of the wider site, in a sparsely settled landscape, would result in overdevelopment. The inspector said, I do not agree, full stop. So the proposed proposal would result in a new single-storey stable building that you would commonly expect to see in the open countryside. The land taken incursion into open countryside would be modest, and the new building would be screened by well-established earth mounds, hedging and mature trees. So it didn't consider that there was any harm caused by the development being put forward. I think there are some lessons we need to take that away. There's some lessons around clearly our view of impact on the countryside and the inspector's view of impact on the countryside, and we'll have to mull that over. Do you want me to carry on unless someone puts a hand up for questions, or?
Yeah, please.
Okay, fine.
Just before we leave that one, I think we've already started a debate about the need, when we revisit whatever will replace the joint local plan, for a really good think about economic development within the countryside. We've had a number of applications where we've left slightly uncomfortable. So this isn't quite the same, but it's in a similar basket. I think we're going to have to put our minds to that.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. From a personal point of view, and I've certainly said this in front of the South Hams Committee on a number of occasions. I haven't said it here because I haven't been here for some time, but I think you also need to revisit whether there's a need for a policy or certainly greater guidance on what we consider to be appropriate sizes for new farm dwellings, because at the moment it's a little bit of a grey area. So I think that there does need to be a look at, probably a better look at rural policy, full stop. Yeah. So the second application was one at Bickham Farm at, we've got this is right, Yelverton or Roborough. Slurry tank.
The slurry tank, yeah, down the bottom.
Slurry pit. Yeah. Sorry, it wasn't a tank. It was a slurry pit, yeah. Wasn't it? It was an uncovered lagoon. So that's the site. That's the plans. Go back to this. My laptop is very slow this morning. So there are effectively two appeals, because there was an application to us, which was fundamentally for the slurry lagoon and most of the track, and there was an application to DMP because the bottom end of the track was just in the park. So two appeals, but for identical applications. Both the appeals were dismissed, although in reality it was one submission that was dismissed. And there are a number of issues raised, and actually there's some really interesting things to take away from this appeal. So the main issues that the inspector considered was the effects of the proposal on the best and most versatile land, which was normally grade 1, grade 2 agricultural land. Whether the proposal would conserve and enhance the Tamar Valley national landscape. The effects on Shore Pirewoods SSSI and the South Dartmoor Woods SAC, the Tamar Tavery SSS. There's got 3 SSSIs and 4 SACs, where it would have a SAC special area of conservation. Sorry, I should stop just using. Whether there was adequate surface water drainage, and whether the proposal would incorporate adequate carbon reduction measures. Now, I'll come on to that. That somewhat surprised me, because in other occasions where you've got something that's of this nature, you wouldn't necessarily expect an inspector to home in on carbon reduction measures when it's not a more traditional building as such. So apologies in advance. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this one. I think it's quite interesting. So to give you an idea of scale, the proposal was an open earth-banked slurry lagoon centrally located within the field, approximately 56 metres by 45 metres internally. So it's a reasonable sized. I did wonder, like, when you have things like this on the news, you either like, area is football pitches, height is double-decker buses, and volume is normally Olympic swimming pools. And I just couldn't get my head around how many Olympic swimming pools because I wasn't quite sure the graduated depth on the swimming pool. And a depth of 5 metres. So the lagoon would have a total volume of around 7,400 cubic metres, allowing for the calculated slurry storage needs and for rainfall over a 6-month storage period. As an aside, we seem to be getting, we've been getting lots of applications to put roofs on open slurry stores to try and keep surface water out of them. I thought that was a requirement, so I'm slightly surprised it came in as an open lagoon. So perhaps you still can do them. Right, okay. So the inspector did consider that that there was a logical link between the appeal site and the farming enterprise, so we can understand why it was there. But in view of the scale, nature and location within the context of the wider holding, the proposal would, because it was, first thing was looking at the grade 2, I've jumped, grade 1, grade 2, and there wasn't really comprehensive evidence of whether it was or wasn't grade 1, grade 2, and if it was grade 2, it was more likely to be on the lower end of grade 2. So the conclusion on that point was, in view of the scale, nature and location of the site within the context of the wider holding, the proposal would not result in harmful impacts on best value agricultural land. The proposal therefore wouldn't be contrary to policy on that point. Turning to the impact on the Tamar Valley natural landscape, the conclusion was the proposal would not conserve and enhance the Tamar Valley national landscape, and therefore conflict rises with policy TTV 26, DEV 23, DEV 25. And that seek to give great weight to conserving landscape and scenic beauty. That weighed against the application. There's quite a lot of detailed discussion, and this is where I think we need to take a step back and have another look at it, around, in terms of effects on the special areas of conservation and SSSIs, was around, there was conflicting information from Natural England as to whether the ammonia assessment did it or did it not have an impact on the SSSI. And drawing all of that together, and in the absence of any information to the contrary, and taking a precautionary approach, the inspector concluded that the proposal would affect the integrity and internationally designated South Dartmoor Woodland SAC and the Plymouth Sound and Estuaries SAC, fundamentally from ammonia. If that had been the only issue, I don't know whether that had fallen on that point, but clearly it is very much in the minds of inspectors, and this is the first time I've seen an appeal that goes into this much detail on the impact of ammonia from an open slurry lagoon on SSSIs. It's possible that we just haven't had applications in a similar context, but it's the first time I've seen it in that level of detail. So again, that fell against the application. They were happy, subject to a condition that the surface water could be dealt with. In terms of carbon reduction, I'll just read out the sentence, the paragraph, sorry. I understand the aim of the slurry lagoon is to assist with simplifying the storage and handling of slurry, which would, in principle, be likely to result in carbon savings. However, despite its intended purpose to decarbonise the milk production process, there is limited quantification of the actual carbon savings that will be generated when taking account of the proposal as a whole, including soil movements, materials and transportation of slurry. As such, in absence of any cogent evidence to the contrary, the proposal conflicts with Dev 32 of the JLP and fails to have significant regard to the Plymouth and South West Devon Climate Emergency Planning Statement. Again, weighs against it. In terms of justification in the national park, my reading of this is that because it was just a small part of the track, didn't consider that it would have wouldn't cause harm or conflict with the Dartmoor local plan. But because of the impact on, as I mentioned, because of those negative impacts, it was actually refused. Application of costs was made, and I'm sure members have on numerous occasions been asked by members of the public or applicants, agents, well, the planning charter is not really fair. You should let us know applications as we go on. Well, the basis of the cost decision against West Devon was procedural unreasonableness, that we wouldn't engage into proactive discussions, we wouldn't entertain revised plans. And the inspector's comment is, though the applicant's disappointment in the rigidity of the process is understandable, the targets for the determination of applications are not self-imposed by the council, and if an application is made, its assessment and determination should not come as a surprise. I do not have the specific details of the council's planning charter, but if it promotes the consideration of the applications largely as made, then this suggests that front-loading the process would be beneficial. One means of doing this is to utilise the pre-application service to highlight particular validation requirements or policy considerations which an applicant may not be fully aware of prior to the submission. In this case, no pre-application advice was obtained from the council. Because of that, it does not appear the application was made invalid due to a lack of detail. There may have been benefits to such details being submitted, but it wasn't why it's made invalid. My overall decision finds in favour of the council, though not on all issues, having reached a balanced view, but the council didn't act unreasonably, therefore no costs were awarded. I think this is probably the third or fourth appeal decision we've had now that basically backs up that the application process isn't one that you should be changing the application through it. If you want, you should be doing it through pre-app. So that's really good. It's not so relevant to all of us in the room, but costs were awarded against Dartmoor National Park on this. On this, I won't go further anymore.
On this one also, not a conflict exactly, but I think the council were wanting to seek the advice of Natural England. I think it was Natural England that had a sort of specialist in slurry pit stuff, and we were sort of reliant on a third party's advice on what should be allowable and what shouldn't be allowable.
Yes. Yeah, and there are clear from the appeal. There are clearly two reports that have come in from Natural England that say slightly different things, but that's what the inspectors relied on it. And I think when you've got something that's that close to a triple SI, I can't see how any council can determine an application without ensuring that Natural England are happy that there is either is or isn't adverse impact on that triple SI. I think that's, and I would quite happily defend that all the time, because it's too important a designation to just deal with an application without having the expert view. On this one, I may have to defer to the ward member who probably knows more about it than I do.
You, Councillor Jury.
So, the application was for demolition of a store and erection of a two-storey building for ancillary domestic garaging, workshop and storeroom above. So we'll go through the plans first. So it's Lower Hill Farm. So you can see the application site is within the confines of the existing buildings. It's the site down here. Can you see my cursor? Yep. That's the proposal. And that's what it replaces. So that from that. So the council had two fundamental issues with that. One was the height of the building when viewed from the highway. Didn't consider the scale of the mass was unacceptable. And the second reason was dormers into the design, but bigger than that. That might have been those. During the appeal, they submitted revised plans that removed the dormers, which they're entitled to do, and therefore the second reason for refusal fell away. And the inspector considered that actually there's a variety of sizes, scales of buildings there, that actually the white rendered building there probably jarred more than a two-storey stone building would, and considered it to be acceptable.
Can I just come in? I do read these as they come through, and I've noticed quite a few times where the applicant has been allowed to change the design of the plans that have gone, the original plans have gone to appeal. And I can't see how that can be allowed. If you've got plans, you put them in, you say, no, that's what goes to appeal. It shouldn't be changed or be allowed to be changed.
I'm sure Mr. Fairbairn will correct me if I'm wrong here. There's been a number of court cases. The main one is Wheatcroft, where fundamentally the courts have said, but that's been qualified by something else more recently, and I can't remember what the newer one is. It's in one of the, but basically the Wheatcroft principles are that provided no one is prejudiced by those revised plans, it is open to the inspectors to take them into consideration.
Because the inspector is a planner.
Most of them are now. When I first started, there was just as many engineers as planners, but that they are able to take them into account. What you shouldn't be able to do is fundamentally change an application. So if it's, although I would argue one I'm going to come on to in a minute, did fundamentally change the application, but it lessened it, I suppose. So if you've got an application in for 3 dwellings, I don't believe you can then change that for 4 dwellings, because that fundamentally changes. But if, as we'll come in a minute, if you've got an application for 3, and the reason for refusal related to one of them, the inspector is likely to accept revised plans that deletes the one that's a problem, so you're just left with what the council didn't have a problem with in the first place. Why? I don't particularly like it, but lawfully they're absolutely able to do it. Where I think it's problematic, and I'll come on to in a minute, is where effectively it is an appeal allowed against the council, so it shows that we've lost an appeal, but actually we haven't, because the element that we were objecting to is no longer in front of us. which I think that's just a bit unfair on the council. I've read this folly. I kind of remember being here when this was originally granted outline consent, which I think was on appeal. I will accept that charge if need be. So this is a reserved matters for 10 units, affordable lead. That's the layout. That's the plans. So it's a reserved matters. The officer concern was predominantly that there's a policy in the JLP that when you've got an affordable lead scheme, the open market housing shouldn't be more than 40% of the units or 40% of the land take. In this case, the open market dwellings was 46% of the land take, so we had a problem with that. The application is for six affordables and 4 open market, so it's 60% affordable. And we had a slight issue with the mix of the open market houses. So the inspectors, we also had a conference. We also had an issue with some of the design elements, particularly some wooden fences and some rendered elements. So the inspector's gone through that, and this is a really good appeal decision to read, members, for a number of reasons. So the inspector's gone through the evidence that we put forward in terms of the census data for the mix. I've seen similar evidence put in front of other inspectors, and the decision's gone the other way. So I think it's very much balanced here. But the inspector has fundamentally taken as a whole, the scheme will deliver 2, 3 and 4 bed houses, both open market and discount, and will feed into the wider objective of JLP policy. And then with the site area, my very rough summing up of this is that, yes, it is 6% over the 40%, but it's only 6%. And when that's balanced against the tilted balance for the approval of housing, when looking at the whole, the harm doesn't outweigh the lack of 5-year supply. That's my reading of it. In terms of the design and distinguishability of tenures, broadly speaking, the inspector felt that the affordable housing was blended in and was acceptable. Did accept there were some materials of the scheme that were unacceptable, and has imposed a condition requiring those materials to come, those elements to come to us to be approved. And there's also concluded there was a slight adverse impact on trees, but put it in the balance. So I think the planning balance of the inspector here is that the identified harms do not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, and the main benefit was provision of 6 affordable units and 10 units when we have got a 5-year supply. I think this is. I believe that this is a very good indication of where inspectors are likely to go, where you've got some clear harm in terms of policy, but the harm isn't. If it was 55, 60% of the land take, I think they might be at a different view, because it was only 6% over, because it's still delivering housing. I think this is the line inspectors are likely to take with tilted balance. I'll happily take any questions on that one because I've skimmed over it, I'm afraid, but it's a really interesting appeal decision for members to read this one.
Interesting to note the viability on that one.
Well, don't start me. If we look at the whole of viability, housing needs assessment for Follick area for the Inwardley parish, going back a few years, I think it was about 20 houses up until 2000 and whenever it was. They're now having 43 houses and it's still classed as a sustainable village. It's not, never was. That estate road is over twice the size of the little road it comes out onto. It's more or less a single carriageway. It's, appalling.
I didn't touch on the sustainability because this was a reserved matters and that horse had gone at the. We argued that in front of the inspector before, and also, and in terms of viability, the one thing I will point out in here is because of the age of the outline consent, this will be before B&G. So that is, I'm not going to try and guess the difference in house prices at Folligate to Oakhampton if there is even a difference. I don't know.
When I go to the parish meeting, all these, of course, they come up regularly. And the interesting fact is all the people who've bought these new houses, there's 3 estates that will come with this one. There's not one local person in them.
There was a cost application there, but the council seemed to be acting reasonably. I probably ought to hand this one over straight to Councillor Moody, as he's mentioned in dispatches. I suspect it's because I think it's probably come from the precise reasons for calling in the officer report, because you wouldn't normally have minutes of the meetings and who said what in the council. I think it's from there, and it is relatively rare.
The opinion that I had reading the report and all the rest of it is that all the reasons for refusal, which went to appeal and supported by the planning inspector, had been overcome, and when the officer was looking at the new application that overcame the objections, he applied an additional condition which wasn't included in the first refusal. And I felt that was a little unfair, and that's why I voted against the officer's decision.
There's hands up here. There is a clear lesson to be learned here. So there was an application. This is a two-story. Oh, God, it's a two-story extension on property within Tavistock. That's the property that was previously refused. Went to appeal. The appeal was dismissed, but the inspector gave a clear steer as to what the issues were. They came back in with a fresh application and clearly dealt with the issues the inspector said were the issues. The application was subsequently refused with officer recommendation at committee for a reason that you're absolutely right, hadn't been raised in the first. And the inspector has fundamentally said that's just not acceptable. So the lesson for officers is clear. When you're refusing application, well, and for members actually, if you're overturning officer, when you're refusing an application, you must include all of the reasons for refusal, not just the headline one. We need to include all of the reasons for refusal, because we cannot come back and have a second bite of the cherry. Not reasonably. The only time you can do that is if there has been a change in circumstances. So if planning policy has changed, it no longer complies with policy, or if national policy changed, or if there's been a change of something on the site. But you'd have to show a material change in circumstances. So I think there's absolutely a lesson to be learned there from an officer perspective. Near the end. I've got them the wrong way around. This is the one that I think puts us in poor light, because effectively the appeal was allowed. What the application was for a detached bungalow and a separate access and carport. Here's the site off Mones Close. Not sure how to pronounce it. Well, this is the wrong way round. That's the wrong site, isn't it?
Is it down Park Road?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. This was it's the wrong title for these. That's what's the appeal was dismissed. Yes, but I'm looking at the title page for Abbey Spring, and then it goes to Down Park. So it's the title on the slide that I've got wrong. Sorry. So Abbey Park, application for 2 dwellings. The main issues were the impact on the living conditions of adjoining properties and the living conditions of mainly West Down. And the inspector basically said plot 2 would have a first floor balcony clearly facing to the rear gardens of 7 and 8 Deer Leap, and there would be an issue. Also, that the cramped nature of the design was such that it would be out of keeping with the surrounding area. I think if they came in for 1, different matter. So this is the one that caused me a little bit of. I think on the statistics, this will come out as an allowed appeal. But what it was a bungalow, new bungalow, and an access. So the access and carport being here, the bungalow being here. We never had any problem with the access and carport, never formed a reason for refusal. The main issues from us were the effects of the dwelling on the character and appearance of the area, the living conditions of the occupants, effect on the Tamar Sound SAC. On all of those points, the inspector agreed with us and said the dwelling is unacceptable. So they've issued a split decision saying, yes, the development is unacceptable, causes harm, not appropriate in the area, but the garage is fine. So it's a split decision, but the only element of the approval is what the council didn't have any problems with anyway. So the fact that when you look at appeal statistics on the government website, it's allowed or dismissed. You don't have split decisions on there. So it will go as an allowed and appeal, but all they've actually, but in effect, it should probably go down as dismissed, because the main element, they're completely agreed with us. So it's just unfortunate the way that comes out. I apologise for the relatively swift run through, but I'll happily answer any questions. But I think I really would strongly advise members, if they can, to read through the Folligate appeal, because I think that's a very, very interesting where we're likely to be going with tilted balance.
It's interesting in that last one that one of the reasons for refusal was the living conditions of the applicant.
Yeah.
I mean, the applicant applying for something that makes his living conditions less.
Yeah.
But I suppose that reinforces the view that planning decisions about the use of the land rather than who lives in the particular house at any particular time.
Yeah, and the inspector dealt with that point really well, but basically saying that whilst this applicant may be happy with it, then but you're creating a far less. You've got a dwelling with far less amenity, so you're looking at impact on dwellings rather than who the applicant is.
Exactly. Okay, that was great. Thanks very much for that. We move on to agenda item 9, which is the undetermined majors. There's an update on against each one in red. And we normally take these on a sort of an exception basis. If any members of the committee want to talk, we'll bring one up. Now's the opportunity to do that. Or are you content with the updates provided? Some of our old friends are there. The Wool Grading Centre refuses to budge. Now 7 years old, I think. But by and large, there is progress. And one of the things we've discussed in committee 2 ago, I think, was we'd really like to expedite the 106 position. If we can't agree to 106 position, can we sort of draw a line under it rather than have it sort of ongoing forever, that every month we say we're still trying to negotiate the 106 position?
I'll say something then. Yes, we can, but I think there are times where it's not necessarily either the applicant or the local authority's fault that there's a delay. Sometimes you do get delays with other third parties who need to sign it. So I think we could, but it needs to be on a case by case.
Yeah, I think what we're looking for is have we done all that we can do?
Yeah.
To expedite them.
Yeah, if it's just gone into the long grass and there's been no progress, then I think that they're the ones we need to bring back.
Okay. David, do you?
I'm not sure that I have anything to add to what Mr. Wyman said.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Leach.
When it comes to 106 agreements, it's all right waiting and eventually getting the sign. For me, I want to find better ways to make them actually keep to them. The agreements, Oakhampton's, yes, knows what I'm talking about. Oakhampton's a perfect example where the link road should have been opened 2.5 years ago. Now it's only open temporarily because the surface still hasn't been finished. And it's only while we've got this blockage in the main road. My worry, as I spoke to Peter, is this now going to be another excuse why that road isn't finished?
I thought that road was finished at the weekend.
No, still got the top. The area of the blockage still got to have a top surface on. It's still got to have. It's open temporarily to allow traffic to get round the town instead of going a 3-mile detour.
So they have opened it to allow.
Yeah.
But not in accordance with the 106.
Well, no, really? I don't think they're in breach of the. Are they?
The original.
Right, the original. Yeah.
And that's the point.
I believe it's the 26th of this month.
It's got to be completely finished.
It's got to be completely finished and open.
How long is the blockage happening in 4th Street?
I've seen a recent one for South West Water in the week before Christmas.
Right. I'll ask a question in a minute.
The actual conversation about the original 106 that goes back 2 years.
Too many fingers in the pie here. Let me know when the live streaming is off.